Why, hello there, dear listener. I'm your host, Erwin Blackthorn. This is the Dirty Lore House Podcast, coming at you with all the deliciously nutty, dirty lore. Today, I have a special guest, Twicesix, who's a fellow writer, and I guess we're going to be talking about white people or something. Why, so you're a white guy or what?
Totally.
Are you guilty of being white?
Negative.
Do you apologize for being white?
I do not. I am not sorry. I'd like to re-up my subscription if I could, please. I'd like to order, actually two. Can I double down on the subscription in case one runs out?
Can I get the premium version?
Yeah, I'll take the premium version of that.
With blonde hair, blue eyes, and extremely fair skin.
I'm already close there.
Check the little boxes with freckles on there.
Yeah, I'm just gonna re-up what I got because I'm pretty close, and people get confused if I start, changing colors like an anime character.
Dude, okay, so I know this is gonna be like really out of place, but do you know of the people who are complaining that anime is white supremacy because the characters look white?
Yes.
Like, have you heard of these arguments?
So there's an interesting reason why this is happening. It's actually very specific, and it's kind of tied into kind of why our culture is, I would say, in a free fall, tumbling without any sort of direction.
Yeah.
So have you heard of unrestricted warfare? Does that term sound familiar to you? Damn,
it does. But for some reason, my brain thinks of like chemical warfare right away.
It's psychological warfare. How about active measures? Does that term sound familiar to you?
Nah, I'm a pleb. I have no idea what these mean.
So active measures was a Soviet subterfuge program. I wouldn't say program, maybe a doctrine.
Oh, is this that thing that one Russian guy was talking about? And he was saying how like he's going to have like America teaching like Soviet ideas in schools and things like that, and then we won't even notice.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, I know what you're talking about.
There's 4 levels that. What was his name? I'd have to look it up.
Nikolai something? Sokolov? Was it Sokolov?
No, it wasn't. It was. I'm going to look it up right now.
Insert Russian name here. Don't worry about it.
Insert Russian name here. Yeah, so he was kind of a former KGB agent, and he went on TV and kind of talked about this active measures thing. And the whole goal was to turn the United States into a top-down communist country from within, right? You're not going to be invaded by Russian forces coming over the oceans. You're going to vote them in because you've been taught to vote them in, and then they're just going to take over power. Did you ever play Secret Hitler?
Damn, you're mentioning all these things I really wish I knew more about, but I never heard of.
So Secret Hitler is a board game. It's a social board game. You have 2 teams. It's kind of the liberals and the fascists. The liberals' goal is to survive. The fascist goal is to eliminate all the liberals and institute Hitler into power.
Yeah.
So the trick is that all of the fascists know who each other are, but Hitler doesn't. And the liberals don't know anything.
Yeah. You know, I think Trudeau, he played that game and he used that as a guide instead of a warning.
He did. Secret Truckers or whatever. He did. It was terrible. So active measures was a Soviet thing. Yeah. Soviet Union falls. That sort of doctrine was lingering around in our culture for a little while. It didn't really go anywhere. If you look at the 80s is pretty much like the Coke-fueled culture fest of America. Like America. You got like Ferraris and big titty blondes and like sweet movies and
cocaine
books and everything. Yeah, cocaine.
Consumerism.
Consumerism. That's a big thing.
What's that thing? That weird cup they have, like in like Vaporwave, where it's like that blue cup with like the weird purple squiggles.
Oh yeah, oh man, I just can't remember the name of it. It's
they didn't really have a name for it, but it's like a very iconic, like it's like a figure for like consumerism. Is like, you know, you don't even care what you're buying in there. That's everywhere. It's like a solo cup now.
Yeah, basically. So, you know, I would say active measures as a doctrine failed. It got its hooks in us though. So like they bit down on us, but they crumbled. So that was like, they started active measures in like the 70s. Didn't work. Reagan just kind of was like, nah, we're good. And we coasted through. They collapsed.
Yeah.
Unrestricted warfare was a doctrine that the Chinese came up with 1999-ish. And the goal was not to turn America Chinese. The goal was to make America sensitive to Chinese sensibilities.
Yeah.
And the other rule was that the elites can do whatever they want.
So pretty much what we have now, where the elites do whatever they want in both China and America. But the elites in America are kind of paid by Chinese elites, you know?
Well, that's a good point, but
like how Hollywood is owned by China.
Hollywood, yeah. So that is a very specific faction within the CCP. That's a true fact. There was a good podcast by the guys who did ADV podcasts. C-Milk actually interviewed someone from the Hollywood. He was like, yeah, the TLDR is basically Hollywood is 100% owned by China. But that's for this unrestricted warfare. So it's economic, it's cultural. You know, it's just basically societal. And they latched onto the rising internet. Like, they saw what the internet was doing, they saw where it was going, and they said, this is where we're going to fight. So I don't know if you noticed, like in the 2000s, things went from like unashamedly American trending slowly towards like America maybe not so good. We have our problems to like America bad. Yeah. Like that's the overall like thesis of most Hollywood movies. I would argue like the trend from let's just say we graphed it from 2000 to 2012. Let's just say.
Yeah.
After 2012, I would argue we fell off a cliff for a number of reasons. That was kind of like a central point. 2010 to 2012. Unrestricted warfare really like sank its hooks into Hollywood. It sank its hooks into the stock market, into Wall Street. And those were kind of its two main veins. So China was getting really big in the 90s, which is why they were able to kind of gain a vector through Wall Street. Through that, for instance, they were able to just start pumping money into Wall Street, right? You just buy anything. If you thought about just our oil industry is bigger than, I would say, almost 60% of China's economy. It's our economy. The scale of our economy is absurd.
Yeah.
It's really hard to wrap, like it's really hard for me at least to wrap my head around the scale of our economy, because we are number one, but we are number one compared to any one individual other country by a long shot.
A lot of people are worried that whatever their book is, whatever their story is or idea, they think that people are going to steal it, right?
Okay.
You have so many, usually a teenager or like somebody who just started, and they worry so much about people stealing their idea that they don't want to share it online or even like talk about it because they think people are going to steal it. Is that an irrational fear? Because I feel like that's like an irrational thing to fear.
It's a good fear to have, but one that you should be brave to move against. Because
my only fear is somebody will try to take something that I already made and then claim that they own it and then sue me for something I made, right? Mm-hmm. That's my only fear. I don't fear that somebody's going to take money from me or pirate my thing or something, because they're going to do it anyway.
Well, I bet you can name a list of movies. Let's just go with movies that have kind of twin pairings. I can think of a couple in the 90s. Deep Impact and Armageddon is one of them. They're the same idea, but executed very differently. One, I would say, beat out the other. I would say Armageddon was better than Deep Impact.
Or like Under Siege and Die Hard.
Under Siege and Die Hard. Very similar ideas, very different execution. It's a natural thing to want to protect the things that you're making, but you should protect the things that you're making, not the things that you're thinking.
Yeah, totally agree with that one.
There's nothing new under the sun. If you go back to ancient Greece, there were a few authors that were making science fiction, not because they were into science or fiction. In fact, they were kind of not into either of them, but they were making fun of travel logs at the time. That was kind of a thing in writing back in ancient Greece, was like, I went to Rome and I saw this and I did this and I fought this guy and then this happened.
Are you talking about that one story? Goddamn, I was writing about this one. Damn it, I had this. I know there's like this book that was famous. It's called like A True Story or something like that. And the guy talks about like going to the moon and like fighting like moon people.
Yes, there's the moon and the sun, and they're different nations. Yes, exactly. That one, like, exactly.
Up, he gets like taken away by like a tornado and like goes on the moon.
Basically, I mean, if you break it down, what is it really? It's Wizard of Oz plus War of the Worlds, basically. Right?
Yeah, like, because what you're trying to say is that we can't really make anything original, like 100%. It's always going to be based off of something else, or there's like a past idea that already was there. It's like the idea where there's only 7 main plots we can have. What was it? There was like adventure, return, voyage and return, and then there's rags to riches. I think it's tragedy, romance, and then 2 other ones I forget, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, like they're basically aligned to genres.
Yeah, and with those 7 plots, pretty much every movie these days includes all 7 of them, no matter what. Like it's just a big conglomeration of those basic 7, and then they just add something that's related to the culture of current times, or they just add in some kind of genre that they feel like they can explore, you know?
Right. Well, I mean, think about this, though. Lord of the Rings, right? I would say it is a cultural cornerstone, even despite Amazon's best efforts. It's just a giant travelogue.
We got it, all right? It sucks balls.
It's just a giant travelogue, though. Like you start out in the Shire, and they go to Mordor, and then they come back. That's Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
it's a whole travelogue. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happens in there. There's a lot of subplots.
Or like Gulliver's Travels, or
Gulliver's Travelers,
like Thousand Leagues Under the Sea, or
Chronicles of Narnia is a travelogue.
What's that one? There's a stupid genre from like the 1800s to like early 1900s where it was like always about somebody getting like marooned on an island. You know, like Blue Lagoon and Robinson Crusoe or something like that.
I would argue that's a travelogue, though.
No, I'm saying like that's like a travelogue thing. Like, of course, there's going to be an adventure. Like that's what people read the stories for. They want that kind of escapism or voyeurism, you know.
I would say a large majority of Brandon Sanderson's work is travelogues. People just want adventure in their fantasy stories. Like they want to see people going to a place and doing a thing.
All right, I'm going to reveal my power level here. I've never read anything from Brandon Sanderson.
I would say he's an acquired taste, in the same way that Tolkien is an acquired taste. I hope somebody flames me for saying that, but
pretty much anybody online, they say, "Oh, Brandon Sanderson, so amazing," blah blah blah. I'm like, I can't remember anything or any. I don't know anything from the guy. I don't know anything from him. I don't know what to think of him.
I read the first book I ever read by accident was his YA series.
Yeah.
Someone actually recommended, like, "Oh, you got to read Sanderson. What are you doing with your life?" I was like, "All right, whatever." You know, I didn't really think to ask him what should I read. I was just kind of took the advice and ran with it. You know, stupid me. So I just was like, "What?" Fireheart is a very good book. It's a very enjoyable story about superheroes, but they've become so corrupt with their power that whatever they do doesn't matter. Like if you are a certain power level of a certain type of superhero, whatever you do nobody can stop you.
Oh, okay. It's like the Goku effect where like nobody can stop you unless somebody's like basically really powerful.
I would say it's a cross between like Dragon Ball Z and that TV, The Boys. I don't know if you've ever seen The Boys.
See, when somebody explains it like that, I'm like, I want to read that. But then I start reading it, I'm like, oh, it's kind of boring.
I would give it a shot. See if you like it.
I'll give it a shot. What was it called? Firestarter?
Fireheart.
Fireheart. Everybody listening, read that book, and you won't be surprised. Disappointed. You won't be disappointed.
It'll be 100% disappointing and totally boring and a waste of your time. I'm just kidding. No, I like that book. That is
5 out of 5.
5 out of 7. Not enough water. As far as keeping secret your ideas, I don't think that's a good idea for a new writer. If you are I would say a professional writer, even that's probably a dangerous concept because you run the risk of also pigeonholing yourself to expanding the idea. Writing to some degree when you're new is a team sport, like it or not. As writers, we have this stereotype where we lock ourselves away in a room and write. And for the most part, that's true. But brainstorming is one of the critical components of building a solid story. And more often than not, especially like I'm just thinking about when I started writing seriously, like I had problems with prose and things of that nature. And that's always going to be something that you need to bounce off of somebody else. You can't just, unless you like write it, put it down for 6 months and then come back to it. That's the only way I can imagine, being solo and improving like your prose.
So I think I know what you're trying to say, but I'm going to say it in a kind of weird way. Mm-hmm. When you read your own writing, you already know how you speak, right?
Right.
But then later on, you do change your way you speak because you've encountered different things and you have like a different way of thinking later on. So your brain sort of evolves over time as long as you're getting some kind of stimuli or some kind of like thing inputted, right?
Right. So I would argue even on the micro level though.
I don't know about micro level.
I got this. Just talking like day to day. I got some feedback some while ago, and in one of my writing groups, that the writing was very stilted and sounded asthmatic. And we pointed out where it was, and like I looked back at kind of the changelog on my Word doc, and like that was like a period when I would like write like a sentence, and then somebody would call me for work, and I'd be like, do the thing, put it back down, write a few sentences. Have to answer a critical email, something just going back and forth.
Okay. Because when I was reading your story, I'm like, it does feel like when somebody, like, they kind of come back later on and then, like, they forgot, like, the feeling, the emotion of that one certain moment, and they try to, like, resume it. Yeah.
That's kind of a weakness of just how I'm able to get writing in. But you don't see that in the moment. Like, when you're looking at it, you're like, I know exactly what's going on. This is the emotion. This is the feeling. You don't get the ability to put distance between yourself and the writing, your own writing, until you've walked away for me, it's months. Because even like in a few weeks, I could go back and look at a piece of writing and be like, yep, this is what I was thinking. This is what I was doing. This is how it should feel. Looks good to me. And then I hand it off and it's like, what the hell is this? Dude, what are you giving me?
For me, I can't recognize my own writing sometimes. Like a month or two later, even like a week later, I'm like, who the hell wrote this? Oh, it was me.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why my notes, sometimes I had to rewrite notes because I'll try to make it kind of cryptic so that like it's not like a clear idea, but it'll give me another idea later on. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to explain that one, but my notes, if somebody else reads it, they would think it's like some kind of like weird like secret language or something. Like secret code.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think that's better for you to write that way in your own personal secret code, because then you come back to it and you'll get a better idea than what you had previously.
Exactly. Like kind of building notes out, like building the story from your notes, basically, right?
Yeah, but like if I come back to it later on, then my ideas are going to be completely different because I think in a different way or have some kind of like new knowledge that I gain. And then so if I try to like focus myself into one specific idea, I'm going to be stuck with that one idea. I don't really know how to like go away from it, right? But if I leave it open to like interpretation, then that's when a better idea can come in, if that makes sense.
Exactly. And I don't throw away ideas. They're throughout, me trying to improve. I've written like a ton of stories that they didn't work because I poorly executed them. But like the ideas I still like. Like I wrote the synopsis down, and either I use them as snippets in other pieces of stories now, or just reattempt it.
Or just change genres even.
Change genres. Like you could transform, like, an idea changes completely if you just pick out certain details from it and flip it around.
Like I do have a thing where sometimes I'll take like a fantasy idea and I'll just change it to sci-fi, or I'll take a sci-fi idea and change it to fantasy and see what happens.
It's kind of why I'm excited about the world I'm building now. The problem I'm having is that it's a little bit muddled between sci-fi and fantasy, and I don't know if...
Oh, because when it comes to fantasy, there's low fantasy where it takes place on an Earth kind of style world, but it has to be like Earth. It can't be like a fake Earth, right? And then we just include some kind of magic or some kind of supernatural that isn't supposed to belong in our general sense of what is possible. So it's something that goes beyond possible rather than probable, right? Sci-fi has to remain in the possible, but soft sci-fi, it's a weird genre because people will consider soft sci-fi as either something about social relations or psychology or something, or they'll consider it where it's like almost magic but not quite.
There are instances though where like post-apocalyptic sci-fi is basically low fantasy.
What do you mean?
So post-apocalyptic sci-fi is typically, it kind of ranges, but typically it's like either near future, where there might be some, tweaks on like what we've discovered or what we know or on what we know how to do. But like zombies got added into the mix, or like the economy fell apart and now
like
everybody's...
Fallout, where they have ghouls, and ghouls are like it's almost like a fantasy thing where like somebody survives because they got so radiated they turn into like a zombie.
I would argue, yeah, that's basically... Fallout is post-apocalyptic sci-fi. Yeah. But to some degree, a lot of it has fantasy elements. Let's just use Fallout as an example.
Yeah, because what I would say there is that the possibility is due to the idea that radiation in the world is not the same as radiation that we have in our world.
And the way that radiation interacts with the human body.
Yeah, so that would be like an alternative Earth, what do you call that? Like an alternative Earth, like laws of physics, which at that point you just kind of have to call it speculative fiction if you want to be really like anal about it. But because the way the whole thing flows, you can just say sci-fi and people will be like, yeah, that's sci-fi. I can see that.
Yeah, exactly. It's a mix of like alternate history, because there's like it branches off from like the atomic age and post-apocalyptic sci-fi, or it's just
and a lot of it's based off of the way that radiation would be used in like comic books in the old days, because we didn't really understand it at that time, so it was like retro-futuristic idea radiation.
I think that was a way to quell fears about nuclear war.
Yeah, to have everybody mutated to get superpowers.
Yeah, the bomb's dropped. Oh, cool! Now we all get to be superheroes.
But there's I think it's intertextuality when it comes to something that's postmodernist, and they will use a frame of reference from something in media from before, and they'll go, okay, we're going to work off of this one, and if you understand that one, you'll understand what we're talking about too. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, like, when it comes to Fallout, they're like, okay, well, we're going to base our idea off of this old style. So if you understand the old style, you'll understand what we're doing as well. And that's why they're about, like, Mad Max. They were about, like, the 50s, golden age, like, comic books and cartoons. And, like, it doesn't make sense if we try to apply it to these days. But it makes sense because you're looking at it from a retro-futuristic standpoint.
Yes, like, in the context of the world with added branches off of old culture.
Or like in any Quentin Tarantino movie, where if you saw the movie by itself and that's like the only movie you've ever seen, you'd be like, what the fuck is this? But because there's this big history of the exploitation films from before, with the blood spraying everywhere, you have like hyper violence, and you have like all this crazy stuff going on. Like, then the Quentin Tarantino movie makes sense to you because you have a history behind it.
That is true.
Yeah, that's basically what intertextuality is, and that's like a big part of postmodernism. Is that you have to kind of understand the intertextuality for it to be valuable to you.
A lot of postmodern, I would say, works seem to be very implied. Like that intertextuality is one thing, but like a lot of the non sequitur elements in postmodernism is very implicit. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. There's a lot of non sequiturism. So we talked about Quentin Tarantino, and I would argue he is a postmodern artist. Is that
he is the most postmodernist artist you can be while still being of a good quality without being like shitty. Like people still like him, but you can understand why people don't like him.
And I would let's just take Pulp Fiction as an example, because I think that's the best example of what I'm trying to do. I think what you're trying
to say with this one is that the non sequiturs, it's like the way he makes his dialogue, right?
Well, no, the whole movie's out of sync.
Yeah.
But it's implied that's so. Like it's implicit that you understand like this is not happening in order. But as a normal moviegoer,
non-sequential then. Like it's not in sequence.
But I didn't understand that until someone told me about it.
Yeah.
Either somebody told you about like this wasn't in sequence, or like you discovered it through the story telling you that it's out of sequence. When I watched it, I was probably like 10 the first time I watched it.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that. Like, I'm used to just sequential movies. Like, let's go back to Die Hard. Die Hard, Nakatomi Plaza gets blown up. Bruce Willis saves the day. A to B.
It doesn't have like the explosion first, and then it goes back to, Bruce Willis trying to go through the air duct, and then he goes back to like where he's like at his house or something.
Right. Or if it like in sequential movies, if there's a flashback, it's usually very denoted. Like it's like if it's out of series. Like, it's meant to be out of series, and it's out of series. Like, we're looking back at something. But with Tarantino, that wasn't the case. And as a movie, like, if you just watch it as a linear movie, it makes, it's a good movie. But things don't make sense. Because, spoiler alert, if you haven't watched Pulp Fiction, one of the characters dies, I think, at, like, halfway through the movie. But then, like,
alive again later.
The very end of the movie, it's he's back, and there's that scene, the diner scene.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't think, I guess maybe because I was young, or it just didn't really click with me for some reason, or, maybe like postmodernism doesn't really click with me often. I like Pulp Fiction because it's a quality movie, but like that was something I learned way later. It was like, oh, I guess that makes more sense. And now I understand the movie better.
Have you ever seen that movie Hateful Eight?
Hateful Eight. I think that's
one Western by Quentin Tarantino.
That's the only Western I saw was the Django Unchained. That's the only Western I saw from him.
Well, because in Hateful Eight, it kind of does the same thing with a non-sequential thing where it starts off where like there's like this, I think it's like a tavern or something in the middle of fucking nowhere, and then they're trying to like drop off this like evil lady, right?
Right.
And then the whole place, spoiler alert, the whole place is like ran by the gang of the lady, but they're pretending to be like just random people who are part of the tavern. They already killed the actual like proprietors, right? And then so the whole time you don't know what's going on, but then it shows you later the before where they kill the proprietors, and then that's when you start getting more intrigued, you start getting more into the movie, because like, oh shit, the heroes, or the anti-heroes, they don't know what's going on. This gets more tenseful. So that's why Quentin Tarantino, he kind of is like he's not a master of suspense, he's a master of tension, because he puts the viewer's attention first, rather than like the way the story can really play out, right?
Right.
Because the audience paying attention is more important. And this is why a lot of postmodernist stories, they fail because they don't get our attention, but they make it out of whack anyway.
I would argue they supplement...
substitute, right?
Substitute how to get the audience engaged for flashy, shiny...
that's
ADHD
what I'm talking about right there.
Of.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. They think that you're going to pay attention because it's shiny or because it's flashy, but that doesn't work. You get tired from that. You get exhausted from seeing the same shiny element. It's really dumb because that's how movies these days, they became these big, like, everything explodes, right? I mean, explosion is good, but that's usually left for like the last mission. That's why there's like this big trope in the old days is like the place is going to self-destruct. Why? Because you got to have an explosion at the end. You got to make it reasonable. You got to give a reason for the people to enjoy the ending, right?
Exactly.
But now it's like explosion here, explosion there. 5 seconds later, someone's eating spaghetti. There's an explosion in the background. Nobody cares. Like
it's like a whole movie filled with sequels with no scenes.
And yes, we're talking about Michael Bay movies. Okay, that's literally what it is.
Well, I think Michael Bay was probably the very first mainstream postmodernist. Like all of Transformers was incredibly
basically explosions to movies like that.
Well, not just explosions, but even all of the characters were incredibly disjointed. Like they had one-liners, but they weren't like 80s one-liners where like you had the moment and then you had the one-liner, right?
Like the Arnold Schwarzenegger thing is like stay cool, or he's like let out some steam and he like kills them with steam or something.
I'll be back, and then like he turns around. Like the 80s one-liners had like either the comment and then the moment, or the moment and the combat. Like they paid each other off in some way, shape, or form.
Now it's completely disjointed. And
that's kind of getting back to like what I was mentioning about non sequitur was like, you have a whole bunch of one-liners that didn't come from anywhere. Like, why did you say this? What does this mean?
Who are you even saying it to?
Yeah, like who are you talking to? Me? Am I in the movie?
Well, yeah, because I don't know. Do you consider yourself a postmodernist when you're writing, or not really?
I would argue I'm anti-postmodernist.
Because there's a lot of people out there. They'll go, oh no, I'm not a postmodernist. And then their entire story is literally postmodernist, like throughout the entire time. And that's why I like to make videos about reviewing and analyzing how they fail to be postmodernist, because they're trying so hard to be one thing, and then they're also trying so hard to be another thing. And these are two things that conflict.
Do you think that postmodernism was a natural evolution in our culture, or was something forced?
I think it was technically natural, because we did have something called Dada, right? And you know about that one, or not really?
No, what is it? What is that?
Dada was like a nonsensical art movement during the 1920s, I think. And it was a reaction to World War One, and it was pretty much saying art has no meaning. I can just like shit in a bucket and I'll be as artful as like the Mona Lisa, because everything's meaningless, right?
Right, like kind of like nihilist art.
It was like super nihilistic. And people were just like, I don't care anymore. I'm not even going to try to do poetry. I'm just going to take random words from a bucket, and then that's my poem, because that's how much value art has in general. So it's kind of like a big statement of saying nothing matters in art, and all art is equal. And then they're trying their hardest to make like as crappy of art as possible. And that's where you get the whole art thing where like the person makes a square and then they're like, is that art or is that not art? You know, that whole thing.
Gotcha. Like they usually defend it like, oh, if it makes you feel something, then it's successful.
It pretty much, yeah. They're trying to say like, oh, whatever you feel, that's the meaning that you get. And that's what postmodernism started to do. But the big difference is that postmodernism, I would say there's two types of postmodernists. There's a kind that like is manufactured from corporations, and then there's the other kind that is natural. Would that make sense? Yeah,
I would say like if we go back to our example, like Quentin Tarantino is a quality and probably natural postmodernist.
He would be totally natural because he's making it out of love. He's not making it out of like a disgust for white people or white males or whatever it is. He's not trying to deconstruct things. He's trying to reconstruct it into a better... He's trying to take it from like Z and B grade movies into like an A grade movie.
Right.
And then instead, the other type of postmodernists, they try to deconstruct everything. And then they go, well, we're not going to have the male hero anymore. We're going to have the female atomic blonde, whatever hero, who's going to be able to beat up all the men that they want because I think that's cool. Or, you know, like we had to lie to everybody thinking, let them think that women can beat up men that particular way with that particular body size, right?
Right. With that in mind, do you think column A or column B has a greater number, or A is like the for love of art postmodernists, and B is the corporate?
The love of art, that one is, I would say that one, when it comes to media, like big media, that one's smaller. And when it comes to people being inspired to be writers, it's even more small.
Right. So it makes more sense that someone would be like, they're trying to be a modernist writer rather than a postmodernist, but they've consumed so much postmodernist media that it just kind of seeps into their work.
Well, because whenever I see any teenager or somebody, maybe it's a Reddit thing, because a lot of my opinion comes from Reddit, I see nothing but deconstruction and hate for something that already exists. I hate Batman because he's too strong. We had to make him skinny and we had to make him a dork or something, you know?
Right.
And so I see a lot of it as I want to deconstruct this because I hate what it was, instead of saying I want to reconstruct it because I love what it is, but I want it to be better. And so this whole like personal hyper-individualist thing that's been added on to the postmodernist mindset, I think that's what's turning the whole thing into like a big, huge pile of shit.
That makes sense. Do you think
that's what a majority of people are doing these days, and that's why nobody gets anything done. Like nobody wants to go to the movies these days and see something deconstructed. Like we went to the movies because we like this stuff, and now the deconstruction is, well, you like that, you're going to like this thing that I made for myself. It's like, I don't like it.
So really, mainstream media has fallen into the kind of the column B corporatist, postmodernist, nihilist trap.
Yeah, pretty much. They fell into the trap, and they're also trying to create this agenda that is supposed to be... It's supposed to give meaning, but it doesn't. The women are powerful. Women can tell jokes too. And then they make female Ghostbusters, and there's like literally no jokes in the entire movie.
Right.
The entire thing was just all, I think it was all ad-libbed.
Yeah, I heard that too. Like a lot of the scenes were just like, here's the idea that we want to do, go. And they had to just kind of...
And then they trusted female comedians of all things to be funny.
Like they needed 4 Jim Carreys, and they had 0. They had 0 Jim Carreys.
They needed 4 Jim Carreys, and they had 1 Leslie Nielsen, and then like 3 who's somebody with no funny bone.
All of them.
I was trying to think of like an actor who has like, it's like straight face, like no humor at all.
What's the blonde lady that just constantly makes that? She's getting older now. She just made the Leo DiCaprio joke, but then like they collectively went, oh, it just kind of killed the mood because like all the jokes they make about him are kind of starting to set in.
Lisa Lapinelli?
No, she's not. She's like the anti-funny.
Amy Schumer?
Amy Schumer. They had 4 Amy Schumers. We ran out of Jim Carrey, sorry.
Oh my goodness. We're like making fun of the stupid movie, but I forgot what the subject was.
I think we're talking about how postmodern, like corporate postmodernism is kind of... my thesis is that it's breeding nihilism. It's seeping into the arts, not because it is inspiring.
So you're saying it's causing nihilism. I would say it's causing people to feel there's like a reason, like a meaning, right? But then this meaning is it's just so weird. They're saying the meaning is in your race, the meaning is in your sex, it's in your status as being gay. What the fuck kind of meaning is that?
I guess maybe let's look at it through a different lens. If I'm not mistaken, the other side of modernist is pre-modernist. Is that the right term?
Yeah, pre-modernist would be where we already knew the truth. There's only one truth, and that's pretty much what religion was all about. And everybody just followed the religious sense, and that's why mythology is religious.
Is it safe to apply horseshoe theory in this case? Where it's no longer left and right, but
100% you could, and I would totally agree with that. Where it is trying to be a postmodernist mixed with it's a pre-modernist mixed with a postmodernist sentiment.
It's postmodernism with a pre-modernist ideology, right? So, I mean, the message for many years now is, I think, all agreed by our side, so to speak, that, it's just this neo-religion that's coming up. It's this identitarian Marxist sort of religion.
Wokeism is, because we're talking about wokeism here, which is like a branch of postmodernists. But what's so stupid is they say, no, we're not postmodernists. Some of us are modernists. It's like, yeah, sure, show that. Let's see how modernist they are. What they pretty much do is that they are a civil religion mixed with identity politics. So their religion is based off of the identity.
Correct.
It's like a religion of the self, but also believing that the government is like an extension of the self, because a lot of these people, I've been looking into this, a lot of these people believe they're basically like in the Matrix, and they are the only real thing that exists.
I've noticed that on both sides, though. So I meme this a lot on social media. I think social media is kind of breeding this nihilistic sentiment.
Well, for me, I think it's because people lean towards their own echo chambers. And they go, everyone's agreeing with me. They must be part of me. And then there's also this idea that is based off of New Age religions, which came from Buddhism. And it's about how there is no soul. Everything is connected. And then so these people, they took that and they go, well, there is no soul, but I'm here. I am the main soul of the whole world then.
Yes, it's very similar to that, but different. Like, it's instead of soul, like if you replace identity with soul, like you'd basically you'd be a pre-modernist sentiment anywhere like you see postmodernist writing in that caliber. Like those very esoteric sentiments kind of sparks that I want to say like religious monkey brain in us. You know what I mean? Like I learned a secret and this makes sense. You know what I mean?
It's the flat earther effect where they think that they're
I'm not saying we all believe in flat Earth. I don't, but like there's a flat Earth
version of flat Earth in us.
Exactly, somewhere, something
of anything. It could be something that we're like, I had this super secret idea that nobody believes me on, and then
it could be simple, like the Earth's only 5,000 years old. Like carbon dating kind of disproves that, but you can certainly believe it, especially if you are very big on Bible absolutism. Mine
is that Jesus was an alien.
Could be. I like the Atlantean theory. Have you ever? This is my flat Earth. Okay, so have you heard of the out of Africa theory of humanity? Yeah. Okay, so there's a few scientific models that disprove this. Like Homo erectus actually left Africa way longer before Homo sapien ever existed, millions of years beforehand. But the basic counter theory is that also we're not descended from monkeys, but the opposite way around. Like we're a hybrid of these other various Homo branches. They've all converged on us. What's that?
They're called proto-humans.
Proto-humans, exactly. All of these proto-humans.
Yeah.
We're a hybrid of that, and monkeys
there was a Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, Homo. I think it was erectus, Homo erectus. Mm-hmm. And there's like a fourth one, and then there's like a fifth one that there is no name for.
And the red lake cave, I think I definitely got that one wrong. But that's another. Yeah, we're the theory that counters the out of Africa theory is that we're a hybrid of all of those.
Yeah.
And then if the other model is for Atlantis is if you simulate the lowering of the sea level by 400 meters, which was where it was roughly, I don't know, 15,000 years ago. Atlantis.
You're talking about the Atlantis theory, right?
Yeah, the Atlantis theory. So like these are kind of combined. They're kind of intersecting because there's an argument for Atlantis. If the world is colder, I think it was by like 3 Celsius or something like that, 3 or 4 Celsius. The global sea level lowers by like 400 or 500 meters or something like that.
Yeah.
And then there's a strip of land in between Europe and North America, which can arguably host life.
Wasn't that the land bridge?
Oh, the land bridge is on the other side, which connects Asia to Alaska.
I'm an idiot.
But there's a lot of deep lore. It seems pretty scientific. I've checked some of the numbers, and it seems like even like the sea level thing that makes sense. I mean, like 400 or 500 meters seems like a lot, and there's a lot of water. I think there's a picture on XKCD that shows you as well. I don't know. That's my flat Earth. Like Atlanteans were real.
I was actually thinking of Atlantis one time, and it actually turned into like sort of a plot for a sci-fi story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking if Atlantis was real and a sink, it would be pretty funny to think of it sinking into like one of those under the world oceans. There's like these weird like oceans and rivers that go like across through the center of the world.
Yeah.
And then like it would be funny to think that Atlantis did sink and then just ended up like somewhere like near like the other side of South America or something.
Right.
Or like near Japan or something like that.
That would be pretty cool. Well, that's where like Hollow Earth I think comes from. Like Atlantis
because
itself.
they found out about these like giant like rivers and oceans like just like under the Earth's core.
Exactly.
Or I'm sorry, the Earth's crust.
Exactly. Yeah. So like that's where like Hollow Earth, like, oh, there's people under there and they're plotting to kill us all or something. I'm not a Hollow Earth.
The Nazis ran over there and they hid with the dinosaurs. That's where that stupid movie Iron Sky 2 came from. Do you think there's any validity to that? That there's like dinosaurs?
That's a holy scripture. I'm just going to tell you right there. It's 100% true. All of it.
It's all. Listen, like if there were dinosaurs still existing to this day, I would like to know about it. And
dinosaurs do exist today.
They do?
You can find them usually in people's backyards. They're chickens.
Oh, shut the fuck up. You dickhead. I was reading about that though, like how chickens evolved, and then apparently like almost all chickens came from the jungle of all things.
Yeah.
Like were they swinging on vines or what?
I think like the proto chicken was pretty angry. They were very angry things.
The proto chicken.
The proto chicken. We have proto humans. Why can't we have proto chickens?
I am the proto chicken.
Yeah, it was a robot. It became sentient and then grew skin.
How valid do you think the reptoid is?
Like the lizard people.
The lizard people that own all of America, all of China, everything. They own everything.
Well, I guess in a way, this is an interesting way to think about it. Are we being completely absolutist about it? Are we saying there are people that are lizards? Or can we look at it from a different perspective and say that what we call a lizard brain, which is really mostly thinking from our spinal column, the lizard people are people who don't really have full control over their cerebral cortex.
So they're like, they don't have a monkey brain.
Right. Yeah, so there's like the human brain, there's the mammal brain.
Psychopaths.
Yeah. There's actually, yeah. Like they seem to be very impulsive, I would say, like, right?
Yeah, like a lizard.
They're using the lizard brain. The longest running part of our like nervous system, but the least like what do you call it? Least complex.
Yeah, it's very basic. It's very primitive. It's like all about what drives us, rather than trying to make sense of how we're going to acquire what drives us.
Well, there's like the sections of the brain. There's like, well, the cerebral cortex, like the neocortex, is like the human, logical, very like, rational things of that nature.
Yeah.
That's the part of your brain you use. Then there's like the mammalian brain, which is more emotional. Like there's some decision making, but it's not logical, like emotive. You know what I mean? Like you make decisions based on what you feel, not logical strings of concepts. And then there's like the lizard brain, which is closest to your spinal cord, which is like fire hot, don't touch. Oh my God, ow, hot. But you don't think that. Like your hand gets near fire and then you yank it away because
you're not going to try to rationalize fire burning you first. You're going to be reacting to lizard brain first.
Right. But there is an argument to be had where like they're not reptilian. They aren't categorized as reptilian, but you can argue there are people out there who, for some one reason or another, don't have the capacity to think logically. Maybe they think more emotionally, and they use, I don't know, I wouldn't say the lizard brain, like I think that's more of a meme, but like they're more mammalian brain, where you think with your gut rather than like thinking through a problem.
Okay, so let's say there's the reptoid, right?
Okay.
And their biggest enemy of all is the monkeyoid.
Return to monk. Is that what this whole thing was all about? It's just a giant war. I'm just getting fed into the war machine.
Yeah, it's like the planet of the apes, but like they're fighting against reptoids instead of like humans or whatever.
That would be a good sequel to Planet of the Apes, where like, what was it? What was it, Artemis? Was that like the warlike dude? He gets in the space capsule, goes through space, and then falls onto a lizard planet.
Oh, fuck, dude, that'd be great. I would love to see a story like that. That would give me a reason to see the new Planet of the Apes movie, because I never bothered to watch any of the new ones. I should. I probably should, because I like monkeys now.
I watched the first one with Mark Wahlberg, but that was like way...
Oh, that was a Tim Burton one, huh?
I think that was a Tim Burton one. That one was pretty good, but that's as far as I went into the lore of the Planet of the Apes.
Because that kind of movie, that did hit everybody very strongly, like a big fear that something that we consider as primitive is going to take us over and like pretty much like make us extinct. Just because they get like 2% smarter. What was it? Like the monkeys that use like 10% more of their brain or something?
Yeah, it was something. There was like a serum that allowed them to develop more of their frontal lobe or something. I forget.
The human only uses 10% of their brain, but these monkeys, they started to use 90% of their brain, and they started like creating lasers and all these other crazy contraptions.
I love that meme. Like, you only use 10% of your brain. Imagine if you used 100.
Well, that was the case. You wouldn't be listening to this nonsense.